It was a quiet morning. The kind of morning that slips by without notice. Wednesday, September 29th, 1982, suburban Chicago. 12-year-old Mary Kellerman wakes up with a sore throat. She's a good kid, loves horses, always polite, and this morning, she's just not feeling great. Her parents, worried but not alarmed, do what millions of parents would do. They reach for the medicine cabinet. They pull out a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol. One capsule. That's all. Mary swallows it with water. 30 minutes later, she collapses in the bathroom. Panic. Her parents call 911. Paramedics rush in, but it's already too late. At 7:00 a.m., Mary is pronounced dead at the hospital. Cause of death? Unknown. No trauma. No prior illness. Doctors are stunned. How does a healthy 12-year-old just die? The hospital says it might be a freak medical event. An aneurysm, maybe, or some hidden condition. Her parents don't know what to believe. But the truth is far darker. And it's only just beginning. Later that same day, miles away in Arlington Heights, another family is going about their morning. Adam Janis, 27 years old, walks into a local Jewel-Osco drugstore. He has a slight headache. Not a big deal. He grabs a bottle of Tylenol, pays at the register, and heads home. His wife, his brother, his sister-in-law, they're all in the house. It's a regular Wednesday afternoon. Adam pops 2 capsules, swallows. Within minutes, he clutches his chest, falls to the floor. He's rushed to the hospital, the same one where Mary Kellerman had died just hours earlier. Doctors try to revive him. No success. Another sudden death. Another healthy person gone without warning. At first, it seems like a tragic coincidence. But then, something even more unthinkable happens. Back at the Janis house, while still grieving Adam's death, his brother Stanley feels stressed. A headache of his own. He goes to the same bottle of Tylenol that Adam used. He swallows 2 capsules. Moments later, he collapses. His wife, Teresa Janis, panics. She tries to help. She takes 1 capsule herself, possibly to calm her nerves or out of habit. She collapses too. By the end of that day, 3 members of the Janis family are dead, all from the same bottle of Tylenol. Police are called. This is no longer a coincidence. This is something else. Arlington Heights detectives arrive at the Janis house. They take the Tylenol bottle into evidence. They send it to a forensic lab, and when the test results come back, what they find is chilling. The Tylenol capsules contain potassium cyanide. Not just traces. Enough to kill multiple people instantly. Cyanide. A poison that shuts down cells, blocks oxygen, suffocates the body from the inside out. There's no antidote. No hope. No time. This isn't a medical mystery. This is murder. Meanwhile, in downtown Chicago, another tragedy unfolds. Mary Reiner, a 35-year-old woman, has just returned home from the hospital. She gave birth to her 4th child a few days earlier. She feels a bit tired, sore, understandable. She takes Tylenol. Moments later, she collapses in front of her newborn, dead. Then Paula Prince, a 35-year-old flight attendant. She buys a bottle of Tylenol at a Walgreens. Security camera footage shows her at the register, smiling. She opens the bottle that night, takes a capsule. The next day, friends find her dead in her apartment. Half-full bottle of Tylenol still on the counter. Within just 48 hours, 7 people in the Chicago area are dead. Different ages, different neighborhoods, no connection to one another, except one thing. They all took extra-strength Tylenol capsules. The city goes into panic. Parents empty medicine cabinets. News stations run breaking reports. The words Tylenol and poison flash across every screen. The public isn't just scared. They're terrified. Because the killer? They didn't target someone they knew. They didn't use a gun, or a knife, or a bomb. They used trust. They weaponized the one thing Americans rely on in times of illness: medicine. Detectives now know they're dealing with a killer. One who walks into stores, tampers with products, leaves death behind, and disappears. There are no fingerprints, no cameras, No motive, no pattern, just 7 dead bodies and a bottle of pills. The question is no longer how. It's who. And worse, could they strike again? Arlington Heights, a quiet, middle-class neighborhood outside Chicago. The kind of place where families grow roots, neighbors wave hello, and nothing out of the ordinary ever happens. Until now. Until September 29th, 1982. The day the Janus family was ripped apart by something no one could see coming. Adam Janus, 27 years old, Polish immigrant, loving husband, devoted brother. That morning he called in sick from work. He felt a little off, tired, mild headache. He decided to stay home. So he did what anyone would do. He walked into the local Jewel-Osco drugstore and bought a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol. At around 12:30 p.m., he took 2 capsules. Within minutes, his breathing changed. He clutched his chest, collapsed. His wife, Terry, called 911 in a panic. Adam was rushed to Northwest Community Hospital. By 3:00 p.m., he was dead. No prior illness. No warning signs. Healthy one moment, gone the next. Doctors were baffled. While Terry sat at the hospital in shock, Adam's family gathered back at the house. His younger brother Stanley, his sister-in-law Teresa, and other relatives. They were grieving, confused, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Stanley, 25, complained of a stress headache. He walked into the kitchen, reached for the same bottle of Tylenol his brother had used just hours before, took 2 capsules. Within 10 minutes, he was on the floor, seizing, foaming at the mouth. Teresa panicked, tried to call for help. She grabbed the same bottle to treat her own headache. She took 1 capsule. She collapsed too. By the time paramedics arrived, it was chaos. 3 family members, all healthy, all collapsing in rapid succession. 1 already dead, 2 more barely clinging to life. They were rushed to the hospital, but it was already too late. By the end of the day, Adam, Stanley, and Teresa Janus were all dead. A family wiped out, not by violence, not by disease, but by something inside their own medicine cabinet. When police entered the Janus home, they found the bottle of extra-strength Tylenol sitting on the kitchen counter. Harmless looking, unopened seal, no strange smell, nothing to indicate that inside was death. They took the bottle into evidence, sent it to the lab. They ran tests. What they found shocked even the most seasoned forensic specialists. Each capsule was packed with potassium cyanide, a substance so toxic that 1 grain is enough to kill. Not 1, not 2, but every capsule in that bottle had been tampered with. Someone had opened the capsules, dumped out the Tylenol, and replaced it with a lethal dose of cyanide. Then carefully resealed the capsules, put them back in the bottle, and returned the bottle to a store shelf. This wasn't just murder. It was methodical, calculated, and designed to kill at random. The detectives on the case now realized this was not an isolated incident. This was part of something much bigger. They raced to connect the dots. Back at the hospital, one of the doctors made a startling realization. Mary Kellerman, the 12-year-old who died that morning, had taken Tylenol too. Her bottle? Also sent to the lab. The result? Cyanide. Same as the Janus case. 2 households. No connection, but the same killer. And just like that, a horrifying pattern emerged. Police scrambled to notify stores, pharmacies, clinics. They had to find every bottle of Tylenol on the shelves immediately. But there was a problem. Tylenol wasn't some niche product. It was America's #1 pain reliever. Over 31 million bottles on shelves across the country. And back in 1982, there were no tamper-proof seals. Anyone could walk into a store, unscrew a bottle, swap capsules, put it back, walk out. No cameras, no witnesses, no alarms. It was the perfect weapon. And no one knew how many bottles were poisoned, or where they were, or if it was still happening. The press got wind of the story. Local news aired warnings. The phrase Tylenol deaths hit the front page, then national headlines. That night, millions of Americans went to their medicine cabinets and stared at their Tylenol bottles in fear. Was it safe? Could it happen to them? Who would do this and why? By midnight on September 29th, 7 people were dead, all from the Chicago area. All had taken extra-strength Tylenol, and all had swallowed the same poison. But police still had no leads. No suspect, no fingerprints, no surveillance, just bottles full of death and a trail of bodies. What came next would launch one of the largest product recalls in history, trigger a nationwide panic, and reveal a killer who seemed to vanish into thin air. The poison was clear. The method was horrifying. The motive still unknown. And now, the scope of the Tylenol murders was expanding. As investigators scrambled to connect the deaths, they had one central question. How many more bottles were out there? How many more lives could be destroyed by a single capsule? September 30th, 1982. Less than 24 hours after the deaths began, the Cook County Medical Examiner made it official. Potassium cyanide was the cause of death. Not trace amounts, but lethal doses. Enough in one capsule to kill not one person, but thousands. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't contamination at the factory. This was murder. Someone had deliberately opened Tylenol capsules, replaced the powder with cyanide, resealed them, and returned them to store shelves. It was a new kind of terror. Anonymous, random, silent, asterisk, asterisk. The forensic lab dug deeper. Inside the poisoned capsules, investigators found more than just cyanide. They discovered a compound called benzalkonium chloride, a chemical not naturally found in Tylenol. Why was it there? Forensics believed the killer had used it to clean the capsules after tampering, to wipe away fingerprints. It worked. Every capsule was spotless. No prints, no DNA, no trace. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They weren't just deranged. They were careful, methodical, and they had chosen Tylenol for a reason. In 1982, Tylenol was more than a brand. It was trusted. More than 100 million people used it every year. It controlled 35% of the over-the-counter pain reliever market. But here's the problem. Tylenol capsules were easy targets. They weren't coated tablets. They weren't gel caps. They were two-piece capsules, the kind that could be pulled apart by hand. You could open one in seconds, empty the powder, replace it with poison, click it shut, and no one would ever know. Investigators traced the poison bottles to multiple retail stores. A Jewel-Osco in Arlington Heights, a Walgreens in Chicago, another in Elmhurst, several smaller pharmacies in the suburbs. That meant this wasn't a single store issue. This was intentional product tampering across the city. Someone had gone from store to store, placing booby-trapped bottles on the shelves, waiting for strangers to die. Inside a Walgreens on North Avenue, detectives found a bottle with only 3 capsules left. 2 had already been taken. The last 3, all loaded with cyanide. They were moments away from another death. They moved fast. Officers pulled every bottle of Tylenol from shelves in the entire Chicago area. Helicopters carried emergency warnings. Squads of uniformed police rushed into stores. Asterisk, asterisk, pull Tylenol. Immediately. No questions. Asterisk, asterisk. Meanwhile, Chicagoans were terrified. Phones rang nonstop at poison control centers. Hospitals overflowed with people claiming they'd taken Tylenol. Most hadn't been poisoned, but who could tell? Citizens dumped pills into trash cans, flushed them down toilets. Some even burned them. The fear spread like wildfire. The FDA issued an emergency warning. The message was simple: do not take Tylenol. At Johnson & Johnson headquarters, the makers of Tylenol, chaos erupted. This was a nightmare scenario. Their best-selling product was now a weapon. Their brand name, now associated with death. Executives ordered a nationwide recall. 31 million bottles pulled from store shelves. Cost? Over $100 million. They set up a 24-hour crisis center, held daily press briefings, and made a bold move. They told consumers publicly, if you have Tylenol at home, throw it away. That level of transparency would later be praised, but in the moment, it was pure damage control. Meanwhile, more terrifying discoveries came in. The bottle found in Paula Prince's apartment, loaded with cyanide. Security footage showed her buying it at a Walgreens, smiling, carefree, moments before she took a death capsule. Even worse, a photographer arrived at her apartment with police, took crime scene photos, and in the background of one photo, the Tylenol bottle is visible. The cap is off. The bottle is still sitting there, untouched, poisonous, ready to kill again. By now, 7 people were dead, all in the Chicago metro area. All had taken Tylenol. All had ingested cyanide. The public was reeling. The police had no suspect, no leads, no timeline. And the killer? They weren't just hiding. They could be anywhere, buying poison, filling capsules, walking the aisles of your local store. Right now, the first deaths shook Chicago. But by the start of October 1982, the fear had gone national. Tylenol, once a household staple, now sat on millions of bathroom counters like ticking time bombs. People weren't just scared. They were paralyzed because the terrifying question now was, what if it wasn't just Tylenol? As the deaths mounted and bottles tested positive for cyanide, America realized this wasn't just a string of murders. This was something far more disturbing, a new kind of terrorism, one that didn't require bombs, or bullets, or political motives, just a bottle, a shelf, and a stranger with a plan. News anchors across the country led with the same chilling headline. Tylenol linked to 7 deaths in Chicago, poison found in capsules. TV stations showed pictures of the victims, smiling portraits of Mary Kellerman, the Janus family, Paula Prince, ordinary people, dead in seconds. Cyanide didn't give second chances. 1 capsule, 1 breath, gone. In living rooms across America, parents emptied medicine cabinets. Grandmothers flushed pills down toilets. Some even burned them in backyard grills. Shoppers stopped trusting everything. If Tylenol could be poisoned, what about cough syrup? Vitamins? Baby formula? Fear mutated. From product to system. From one brand to every bottle. The FDA issued an emergency alert. Over 450 investigators were dispatched nationwide. Their job? Search store shelves. Test random samples. Look for signs of tampering. But there was a problem. Back in 1982, tamper-proof packaging didn't exist. Bottles weren't shrink-wrapped. Caps weren't sealed. There were no pop-tops, no blister packs. Just a screw-top lid. Easy in, easy out. No way to tell if someone had poisoned your pills. The FBI got involved. Local law enforcement coordinated with the CDC and FDA. All were asking the same question. Who did this, and how can we stop them? They considered 3 possibilities. 1, a disgruntled employee targeting Johnson & Johnson. 2, a serial killer choosing victims at random. 3, or worse, a copycat wave just beginning. Because now, reports were coming in from other states. Philadelphia. A woman claimed her Tylenol smelled like almonds, a telltale sign of cyanide. Seattle, a hospital nurse reported feeling dizzy after handling capsules. Houston, a grocer pulled all painkillers from his shelves after local customers panicked. Most were false alarms, but the public didn't care. Rational or not, the fear was real, and suddenly every over-the-counter drug was suspect. At Johnson & Johnson, executives met in emergency sessions. They knew the brand might never recover, but they also knew they had a choice. Fight for trust or fade away. So they made a historic move. They announced the largest consumer recall in U.S. history. We are pulling every bottle of extra-strength Tylenol from shelves nationwide. 31 million bottles, across every state. Estimated loss? Over $100 million. But they weren't done. They also launched a hotline, ran full-page ads in newspapers, offered free replacements in tamper-proof bottles once ready. In a bold act of transparency, they told consumers, "Don't wait for us to take it off shelves. Throw your Tylenol away." Meanwhile, on the ground, the FBI worked tirelessly. They formed the Tylenol task force, pored over store receipts, security footage, and customer lists. They interviewed hundreds, cashiers, stock clerks, pharmacists. They chased every lead, and came up empty. No one remembered seeing anything strange. No one saw a person tampering. No cameras caught someone placing poison bottles. There were no fingerprints, no purchase trails, no motive letters. The killer had left no trace. Back in Chicago, residents slept with their cabinet doors taped shut. Some locked up their medicine. Others stopped taking pills entirely, even for real pain. That's the psychological toll of invisible terror. It changes how you trust. It rewires your instincts. And it lives in the back of your mind every time you twist open a bottle. The case had now captured global attention. In Tokyo, newspapers reported on ** America's Medicine Murders, **. In London, tabloids speculated on a ** new serial killer with a scientist's mind, **. But back in the US, one thing was now certain. This wasn't just a Chicago problem. It was a national crisis, and unless the killer was caught, it might never end. 7 people were dead, an entire industry shaken, and the killer still at large. But then a letter arrived, anonymous, coded, threatening. It claimed to be from the person behind the Tylenol murders, and it demanded $1 million, or more people would die. Was this the break investigators were waiting for, or a cruel distraction in an already twisted game? 7 people were dead. The nation was terrified. The killer? Still a ghost. Then, a letter arrived, typed, short, sinister. It claimed responsibility for the Tylenol murders, and it came with a demand: pay me $1 million, or more people will die. This wasn't just murder anymore. It was extortion, and the FBI finally had something tangible to chase. The letter was postmarked October 1 SD, 1982, just days after the deaths began. It was addressed to Johnson and Johnson headquarters. Inside was a single page, no name, no signature, no fingerprints, just a typewritten threat. The message? Crystal clear. If you want the killings to stop, wire $1 million to a specific bank account. A classic ransom scenario, but with a terrifying twist. The weapon was still in stores, still in homes, and still capable of killing. The bank account in the letter was real. It belonged to a New York man named Frederick Bruno. But he wasn't the one who sent the letter. The real sender had used Bruno's identity, hacked into his personal information, set up a fake account, all to create a trail of confusion. But it didn't work, because the FBI had something else. A second envelope. A few days later, another package arrived. This one went to the Tylenol manufacturer's parent company. Same message, same style, same threat, but the postmark led them to Elk Grove Village, Illinois, close to the crime scene. Too close. The FBI narrowed their search, pulled records from nearby post offices, checked surveillance logs, and finally, they had a name: James William Lewis. James Lewis, 36 years old, originally from Missouri, living in Chicago at the time of the poisonings, a former tax consultant with a criminal history, arrested for fraud, linked to a murder investigation in Kansas City. He fit the profile: smart, calculated, and just unhinged enough to try something like this. The FBI moved in, but when they arrived at his last known address, Lewis was gone. A nationwide manhunt began. His mugshot went out to every post office. News anchors flashed his face across television screens. Asterisk, asterisk, have you seen this man? Asterisk, asterisk. For 49 days, Lewis was on the run. He moved through Chicago, New York, and finally New Hampshire, using aliases, staying in cheap motels, disappearing into crowds. Until November 1982, he was captured. FBI agents brought him in, questioned him for hours. They had the letter. They had the bank account. They believed Lewis was the extortionist. But there was one massive problem. They couldn't tie him to the murders. He had no access to the stores. No cyanide in his possession. No fingerprints on any of the capsules. No direct evidence linking him to the poisonings. Was he trying to exploit the tragedy for money? Yes. Was he the actual killer? They couldn't prove it. James Lewis was charged, not with murder, but with attempted extortion. He stood trial in 1983. Prosecutors painted him as a manipulative opportunist, capitalizing on chaos for personal gain. The jury agreed. Lewis was convicted. He served 13 years in federal prison. Released in the mid-1990s. Free. Still denying any connection to the poisonings. Still insisting he was innocent. But even then, he remained the FBI's prime suspect, just not an indicted one. With Lewis behind bars, the immediate threat seemed neutralized, but the public wasn't reassured, because the central horror remained. Who really put the cyanide in those capsules? Was it Lewis after all, and he just outsmarted the system? Or was the real killer still walking free? Over the years, investigators pursued dozens of leads. A dock worker with a grudge against the pharmaceutical industry. A deranged chemist obsessed with poisons. Even a copycat who tampered with Excedrin bottles years later. All dead ends. All false alarms. The Tylenol murders became one of the most expensive investigations in FBI history. Over 100 full-time agents, thousands of tips, and still, no arrest for the actual killings. James Lewis became the face of the case, but not the answer. In interviews, he remained smug, defiant, winking at cameras, smiling through questions. When asked directly, "Did you kill those people?" he'd reply, "If I did, you'd never prove it." And he was right. They never did. 7 dead. A suspect convicted of extortion. And still, no one charged with the murders. The case may have gone cold, but the aftermath? It revolutionized America. Because if the killer couldn't be found, one thing was clear. The system had to change. In the weeks after the poisonings, chaos turned to action. Supermarkets began pulling painkillers. Pharmacists stopped recommending Tylenol. Even doctors grew hesitant. The public had lost something almost sacred, trust in everyday medicine. And that Johnson & Johnson knew was harder to cure than any illness. In corporate boardrooms, executives scrambled. Lawyers advised silence. But Johnson & Johnson took a risk. They went the opposite direction, full transparency. CEO James Burke addressed the public. Openly, honestly, we didn't cause this, but we will do everything to stop it. And they meant it. They didn't just recall 31 million bottles. They redesigned the entire product. Tylenol returned to shelves with a message. You can trust this, because we've changed everything. Studio microphone, narrator, factual, deliberate pacing. By November 1982, Tylenol came in a new 3-layer safety seal. A glued box flap, a plastic shrink band, a foil inner seal. Tamper-evident, impossible to open without leaving signs. It was the first of its kind in U.S. medicine. Competitors followed fast. A new standard was born. Within a year, blister packs replaced capsules. And soon, every over-the-counter product had to pass one test. Is it safe from sabotage? Congress moved quickly. In 1983, they passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act. It made it a federal crime to tamper with consumer products. Penalties? Up to life in prison. Later that year, the FDA passed a regulation. Every manufacturer had to make tampering visible. If a seal is broken, the product must say so. The Tylenol murders hadn't just shifted a company. They changed federal law, and it changed you. From that moment forward, Americans looked at medicine differently, more carefully, more suspiciously. You checked seals, twisted caps, shook bottles. You stopped trusting what was inside, until the outside proved it was untouched. That instinct, born in the autumn of 1982, it became part of us. But even more shocking, after the relaunch, Tylenol bounced back. Within a year, it reclaimed over 30% of the painkiller market. Not because it was safer than the rest, but because they were first to act like it. Johnson & Johnson's transparency wasn't just good ethics. It was smart business. They didn't just save a brand. They rebuilt an industry. The Tylenol case echoed into other sectors. Food packaging changed. Cleaning products got childproof caps. Cosmetics began using tamper rings. Every aisle in every store began to look different, all because of one invisible killer who was never caught. But while the world moved on, the victims' families never truly did. Mary Kellerman, Adam Stanley and Teresa Janis, Mary Reiner, Mary McFarland, Paula Prince, 7 names, 7 stories, 7 people who just needed relief from pain and paid with their lives. In interviews, family members described the toll. A brother lost to a migraine, a wife gone after giving birth, a child who never made it to school. Their grief wasn't just personal, it was national. It became woven into how America understood tragedy. This wasn't just random violence, it was fear sold in a bottle. The Tylenol murders weren't just a crime, they were a turning point. They forced America to ask a brutal question. If you can't trust what you buy, what can you trust? And while we never got an answer, we did get change. Change in how products are made. Change in how companies react. Change in how fast laws are passed when lives are on the line. The killer may have disappeared, but their impact didn't. It's in every bottle you open, every seal you break, every package you inspect. Because in 1982, someone made it clear, safety isn't assumed. It's built, and sometimes only after 7 innocent people die. We remember the victims, we carry their legacy, and we remain haunted by a question that still has no answer. Who did it? The Tylenol murders terrified the nation. 7 people, random victims, all killed by something they trusted, but just when America began to recover, it happened again. Different cities, different products, same chilling method. The Tylenol murders hadn't just shocked the country. They had inspired a new breed of killer, the copycat. Within months of the Tylenol crisis, tampering incidents exploded. Chart increasing in 1983 alone, over 270 product tampering reports were filed across the U.S. Most were hoaxes, but some were real, and some were deadly. America had opened Pandora's bottle, and now no product was safe. Round Pushpin ***, Washington State. 1986, ***, 2 people, Sue Snow ***, and Bruce Nickel, died suddenly. Both had taken Excedrin, a pain reliever similar to Tylenol. Both suffered sudden, violent seizures. Autopsies revealed the cause. Cyanide. Sound familiar? But this time, investigators caught a break. They found the tainted bottles before others were used. And in one of those bottles, they found something unexpected, a single human hair. Authorities traced the purchase of the poisoned Excedrin back to a woman named Stella Nickel, wife of one of the victims, Bruce Nickel. She had filed an insurance claim, claiming Bruce's death was accidental. But the evidence told a darker story. Her library records showed she'd checked out books on poisons. One page, torn out. The topic? Cyanide. Even worse, she had bought empty capsules weeks before the murder. Investigators believed she wasn't just a grieving widow, she was a killer. In 1988, Stella Nickel was convicted of product tampering resulting in death. 2 counts. She became the first person convicted under the new federal anti-tampering laws. Her motive? Dollar banknote money. Bruce's life insurance was worth $76,000. She'd poisoned random bottles to make it look like a random act, to cover her tracks. But this wasn't a crime of passion. It was cold, calculated, chemical, ***, and there were others, each one more twisted than the last. 1991 Colorado. A woman laces ibuprofen with cyanide, sends it to a coworker's house, disguised as a free sample. 1993 Chicago again. A man dies after taking cyanide-laced Sudafed. The source? Never found. A haunting echo of 1982. 1998 Michigan. Someone contaminates baby food jars. No deaths, but widespread panic. Stores pull entire product lines. Each case drew from the same blueprint. Fear, chaos, anonymity, asterisk, asterisk, and, at the center of it all, the shadow of the Tylenol killer. Experts call it the contagion effect. When a shocking crime goes public, others follow, not because they're inspired by evil, but because they see the method. They learn from the headlines. The Tylenol murders weren't just terrifying, they were a manual, and the media unintentionally handed out the blueprint. News anchors showed the capsules. Talk shows speculated about how the poison was inserted. Front pages ran diagrams of how cyanide worked. It wasn't just reporting, it was education for the wrong minds. And once that door opened, you couldn't close it again. What made it worse? Investigators never had a definitive way to track product tampering. No DNA databases, no packaging surveillance, no chain of custody tracking in retail stores. Even with improved safety seals, once a product left the shelf, it was vulnerable, and the copycats knew it. The genius of the Tylenol killer's method was its simplicity, and that made it almost impossible to stop. And yet, every time a bottle was opened, every time a pill was swallowed, families wondered, could this happen again? The scars of the original case never healed, because it didn't end with 7 victims. The death toll grew, so did the fear. And the killer? Still out there, still nameless. The Tylenol murders weren't just a crime. They were a blueprint for horror. They didn't stop in 1982. They sparked a wave, a dark legacy that spread from one killer to hundreds of imitators. And each time it happened, the message was clear. We learned it from the best. 40 years, 7 victims, no justice. In the annals of American crime, few cases have remained so high-profile and so cold. But that doesn't mean the investigators were empty-handed. In fact, from the start, there was a suspect, and his name has haunted the case ever since. James William Lewis. He wasn't found tampering with pills. He wasn't caught with cyanide. But he did write a letter addressed to Johnson and Johnson. If you want to stop the killings, wire $1 million to the following bank account. Extortion. Clear. Calculated. And signed, a concerned citizen. Investigators traced the bank account. It belonged to a man named Frederick Miller McCahey in New York. But McCahey had no idea what was happening. Turns out, the account had been opened using stolen identity documents. The forger? James William Lewis. Lewis was no amateur. He had a criminal history. In 1978, he was charged in the dismemberment murder of an elderly man in Kansas City. The case collapsed on procedural grounds. He walked free, but his trail of fraud, threats, and manipulation stretched across multiple states. Now, in 1982, he was writing blackmail letters about a national tragedy. Coincidence? The FBI didn't think so. Lewis went on the run, disappeared for weeks. A manhunt began. He was eventually arrested at a New York library, calmly reading a newspaper. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't hiding. He wanted to be caught on his terms. He was charged with attempted extortion, not murder. And in 1983, Lewis was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He served 13. But here's what haunts investigators. Despite the conviction, Lewis never admitted to poisoning anyone, and there was no physical evidence linking him to the Tylenol bottles. No fingerprints, no hair, no cyanide in his possession. Just the letter, just the timing, just the threat. So, why do so many still believe he did it? Because everything fits, just enough. He had a chemistry background. He knew how to handle poisons. He understood forensics. He liked power. And he loved puzzles. Lewis struck us as someone who enjoyed the game. The manipulation. He didn't want money. He wanted control. Control over Johnson and Johnson. Control over the police. Control over life and death. But here's where the case collapses again. Lewis was in New York when the Chicago poisonings happened. At least That's what his lawyers claimed. No one could put him in a store near the tampered Tylenol. No surveillance. No receipts. Nothing solid. He was slippery. Careful. And maybe, just maybe, lucky. Other suspects came and went. A dock worker with a cyanide stash. A pharmacist with a grudge. Even former Tylenol employees. But every lead hit a dead end. Every theory collapsed under scrutiny. DNA testing wasn't advanced enough. Surveillance cameras were rare. Security protocols were laughable by today's standards. The killer moved in silence and vanished just as quietly. But then, in 2009, something stirred. The FBI reopened the case, and this time, they had tools they didn't have before. DNA analysis, computer forensics, advanced behavioral profiling. They searched Lewis's home in Massachusetts. They seized his computer. They collected DNA. But even with all of it, they still couldn't prove a thing. No charges, no confession, no closure. Lewis stayed in the spotlight, gave strange interviews, spoke about the case in the third person, even made YouTube videos claiming he was innocent while giving chilling details only the killer might know. If I had done it, I would have picked a busier bottle line. Something that blended in more. Cryptic, calculated, cocky. He was either a mastermind or a man obsessed with pretending to be one. On July 9th, 2023, James William Lewis died. Age 76. Still a free man. Still uncharged for murders. And with his death, one of the last tangible links to the case was gone. Investigators are still working. The FBI says the case is technically open, but leads have dried up. Files sit in dusty evidence rooms, and somewhere, the truth remains sealed, just like those bottles, until someone breaks it open. James Lewis may have been the man behind the letter. He may have been the one behind the poison. Or maybe he was just a distraction, a magician's hand, waving wildly while the real killer slipped through the shadows. It began with a pill, a small, familiar capsule, something meant to bring relief, not death. But in the fall of 1982, that simple act of swallowing medicine changed forever. What happened in Chicago wasn't just a crime. It was a turning point. It shook the foundations of public trust, corporate responsibility, and even government policy. This wasn't just about poison. It was about fear, and the legacy it left behind still lives with us today. Before 1982, you could walk into any store, grab a bottle of pills, open it up, no seal, no second thought. Medicine wasn't protected. It was accessible, maybe too accessible. But after 7 people died from poisoned Tylenol, that all changed. The public demanded answers. And when answers didn't come, they demanded action. Johnson & Johnson had 2 choices: defend the brand or defend the people. They chose the latter, and in doing so, they created a new corporate playbook. In an unprecedented move, Johnson & Johnson is recalling 31 million bottles of Tylenol. It cost them over $100 million, but they didn't hesitate. They went public, took responsibility, worked with law enforcement, and pulled every bottle off the shelves. It was a bold gamble, and it paid off. They didn't just survive the crisis, they became a textbook example of how to handle one. But the biggest shift came in how products were packaged. Before the murders, there were no tamper-evident seals, no foil safety layers, no click caps, no shrink wrap, just a bottle and a cap. That's it. After the murders, everything changed. New federal regulations now require tamper-evident packaging for over-the-counter medications. Congress passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act of 1983. Tampering was no longer just a crime. It was a federal offense, punishable by up to life in prison. But legislation wasn't the only thing that changed. Paranoia spread. Every parent double-checked medicine bottles. Every consumer hesitated before breaking a seal. Stores began locking up painkillers. News anchors did nightly segments on tampering awareness. And rumors spread like wildfire. Syringes found in Pepsi cans. Needles hidden in Halloween candy. Razors in apples. Most were hoaxes, but the fear? Very real. The Tylenol murders had tapped into something deeper. A national anxiety. About the systems we trust. The products we use. The companies we believe will protect us. There's a reason the Tylenol case sticks with us. It wasn't just the randomness of the victims. It was the ordinariness. These weren't political targets. There was no manifesto, no warning, no reason. You could do everything right and still die. That's the terror. And that's why it stayed in the collective memory. When something we trust turns against us, that betrayal sticks. It rewires how we interact with the world. The ripple effect went beyond pharmacies. Retailers restructured supply chains. Security cameras were installed near medicine aisles. Returns of open goods? Now treated with suspicion. Manufacturers across all industries, from cosmetics to baby food, began tamper-proofing their products. Even the design of capsules changed. They began favoring gel caps that couldn't be easily pulled apart. Some companies abandoned capsules entirely. One crime changed everything. Today, tracking a tainted bottle would be easier. Smart sensors, AI-driven inventory systems, barcode timestamps, CCTV with facial recognition. But in 1982, it was a guessing game. No digital breadcrumbs. No cameras on every corner. Just hunches and horror. That's what made it so easy and so hard to solve. And still, after all these decades, we don't know who did it. 7 lives, stolen in silence. No confessions, no convictions, no closure. I don't think we'll ever know who did it. But we live with it. Every day. The Chicago Tylenol murders remain one of the most haunting, unsolved crimes in modern history. Not just for what was lost, but for what was learned. We learned that evil can hide in plain sight. We learned that trust is fragile. And we learned that even something as small as a pill can carry the weight of national trauma. It was a crime that needed no bullets, no fingerprints, no faces, just one ingredient and one bottle to change everything. 7 lives, no justice, no name, no face, and one question that still echoes 4 decades later. Where is the Tylenol killer? He vanished like smoke, left behind no prints, no hair, no fibers, no DNA, just death and silence. But someone somewhere knows the truth. The FBI has spent 40 years chasing shadows, thousands of leads, dozens of suspects, every theory explored. Was it a disgruntled employee, a domestic terrorist, a random sociopath, or worse, someone who did it just to see if they could? This wasn't a crime of passion. It was clinical, strategic. This person planned, watched, and waited. Let's break it down. The bottles were tainted after they left the factory. Different stores across several suburbs, all within a 24 to 48 hour window. All random victims, all died within hours of taking the pills. That means the killer had to purchase multiple Tylenol bottles, take them home, open them, add cyanide without spilling or detection, reseal them to look untouched, then redistribute them back into stores without anyone noticing. That kind of precision takes planning, takes patience, takes nerve. And that raises the question, was it the first time he did it? Or just the first time anyone noticed? We look back through years of poisonings. Painkillers, cold meds, supplements. Nothing matched? But that doesn't mean he hadn't tried before. What if there were other victims? Misclassified, buried, cremated? What if 1982 was just his debut? Some believe the killer was a disgruntled chemist. Others think it was a serial killer who craved chaos. A few theorize it was a form of domestic sabotage, a statement against big pharma or consumer culture. And then there are the copycats, Over 270 tampering incidents were reported in the year after Tylenol. Many were hoaxes, but some were real. Excedrin poisoning in Washington, superglue found in eye drop bottles, cyanide-laced anisin in New York. The poison had spread, not just chemically, but psychologically. The Tylenol killer may have stopped, but the idea of him lived on. And here's the most haunting theory of all. He's still alive, still watching, maybe even laughing. He never killed again, because he never had to. It's possible he got exactly what he wanted. Attention, fear, immortality. He didn't need to keep poisoning. He had already broken the system, and no one ever stopped him. With the death of James William Lewis in 2023, the last major suspect was removed from the board. The FBI has stated that the case remains open. But let's be honest, it's cold, very cold. The evidence is old, the packaging long gone. Witnesses have died, memories have faded. The killer might be dead, might be walking free, might be someone you'd never suspect. What we're left with is a scar, not just in Chicago, but in every American home. Every time you open a pill bottle, you remember. Every seal you break, you hesitate. That fear, that pause, that's his fingerprint. That's the mark he left, and it's still with us. I check every bottle. Always. Because once, we didn't. And people died. The Chicago Tylenol murders changed how we shop, how we regulate, how we trust, but they didn't change everything. Not the need for answers, not the pain of those left behind, not the lingering chill when you take a simple pain reliever. Because the killer got away, and maybe that was always the plan. He struck without warning, disappeared without trace, and rewrote the rules of fear. He didn't want money. He didn't want fame. He wanted power. And he got it. Forever. 7 people. 1 bottle. No justice. The Tylenol killer vanished into history. But the fear? It never left. We still check the seal. We still second-guess the safety. Because we know, once was enough. He changed how we trust, how we consume, how we live, and he never paid the price. So ask yourself, was it really just one man? Or a flaw in the system that never healed? If you made it this far, you're not just watching a story, you're part of one. Because some monsters don't hide in the dark. They hide in plain sight, behind a plastic seal, on a shelf near you. This was the Chicago Tylenol murders. The killer who vanished, but never truly disappeared. Got your own theory? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget, trust no one. Seal everything. Watch everything. Until next time, we'll be watching the cases no one else dares to touch.